How are you? I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but it's possible to buy cheese in a sprayable aerosol can. Now, the idea of this cheese is to spray it on your foodstuff, but if you're so inclined, you can take the can and spray it directly into your mouth. Now, for anybody who's lactose intolerant, this talk is going to contain some cheese, but just a little bit. Quite recently, I had the pleasure of being in the company of a man called Chris Watson. Now, you may not be familiar with Chris Watson's name, but it's likely that you are familiar with his work. Chris Watson is a sound recordist, and Chris Watson has provided the aural paintings, the sound that has accompanied many of David Attenborough's award-winning documentaries. He spends his working life recording the songs, the howls of animals in the wild. And he's also an accomplished musician. And I thought he'd be perfectly positioned to answer a question that I ask myself a lot and that I ask of other people. What is music for? And Chris, being the kind of person that he is, didn't try to come up with something very sophisticated or grandiose. He simply said, I don't know. What is music for? It's a question that I like to antagonize students with sometimes, and I do enjoy antagonizing students sometimes, I'll admit that. And they've given me some wonderful answers. They've said dancing, communication. A lot of them have said mating for some reason. And one student even said to me that music is for washing yourself to. But none of them, at any point, none of the students or none of the musicians that I've talked to, none of them have ever said music is for making money. It's never come up. But I've never had occasion to ask Simon Cowell that question. And if I did, I imagine the answer might be slightly different. But songs are to the music industry as fuel is to a car. It's songs that make the music industry work. Yet a lot of the people who create this fuel for the music industry, they don't look on these songs as a commodity, something that can be traded, like barrels of oil that really fuel industry. They don't look at it like that, but there are plenty of people who do, because we're pretty aware that music is a multi-million-dollar industry. Even in Ireland alone, IMRO have estimated that per annum, the music industry, both directly and indirectly, is worth 703 million euros to the Irish economy. So it is worth money. There's a wonderful talk, a TED Talk, by a guy called Dan Pink. And what Dan Pink does in this TED Talk is he talks about social science experiments that for over a 40-year period tried to figure out what is it that motivates us as humans? What makes us do the things that we want to do? And some of the really interesting findings that he had is that monetary incentives for cognitive tasks, that's tasks that involve our mind and our body, that if you offer somebody a bonus for tasks like that, what the monetary incentive actually does is it inhibits creativity and it blocks thinking. Now think about that for a moment. So for an activity like the creation of music, if you offer somebody money or monetary incentive to do that, it blocks creativity and it inhibits thinking. And one of Dan Pink's main findings is that there's a mismatch between what science knows and how business operates. And in the world of music, what we have is three major record labels that control the creation and curation of most of the music in the world. That's Warner, Universal, and Sony. Thank you. And those three record labels, they reward their most prolific artists, if you believe what Dan Pink says, in a way that inhibits their creativity and blocks their thinking. And that's the equivalent to Exxon getting a massive tanker of sprayable cheese and putting it directly into their oil wells. It doesn't seem to make sense. Let me give you a real-world example of this. I interviewed a musician recently, and he told me about the process that he went through when he signed to Sony Records. And he got a really good record deal. It wasn't just the usual cash advance that he got. He signed what's called a development deal. And that means that he did get the cash advance, but what he also got was he got to work with songwriters who were also signed to Sony. they showed him the ropes. They showed him how to write a song that had broad appeal, how to write a song that conformed to what a pop music hit is. And he also got to work with producers who showed him how to fashion a song and polish it and prepare it so it would get played on radio. And he did that, and he created an album. And the thing about the album was, it did okay. It didn't do great. But what he said was, he didn't feel a connection with the songs on that album that he released. And when the record executives looked at it, they weren't too happy with how the sales went either. So after that first album, that artist was dropped from the record label. And it's a common story. A lot of bands and a lot of acts who sign to a record label, they get dropped after the first album when it doesn't do so well. That can be devastating for a musician, because when you think about it, here's somebody whose hopes and aspirations have built up to one big break. And when they sign that contract with a major record label, they believe that to be that one big break. And when the record label says to them, actually, it didn't go that well, we don't want you anymore. For some musicians and artists, that can be the end for them. They can't pick themselves up from that. But he did. But he decided that he'd release one more EP and then he'd stop making music completely. So he created this EP and he released the first track from it. He promoted the track and he went to bed. The next morning he woke up and RTE were on the phone looking to interview him. The track had gone viral. And not only had the track gone viral, but he had managed to do something that went totally against what he'd been taught by the people who worked for the record label. The track was about 6 minutes long. It didn't have a chorus. It didn't conform to a pop hit. But what it did have was it had part of him in it. And not only did it have part of him, he put a sample of his grandmother into the track as well. And what he did by releasing that track was he found his voice and he found his niche. And now he makes his living from releasing independent music on his own label. Now, there's a book that probably won't be popular with members of the business school who might be in the University of Limerick today. A book called Shut Down the Business School by Martin Parker. And what Martin argues in this book is that the form of business that is taught in third-level institutions is structured on a system that's been proven to be unsustainable, and inevitably it results in short-termism and greed. Now, I've brought my copy of that book if anybody from the business school wants to borrow it when we're finished here today. The business model outlined by Parker is the one that most musicians strive to sign themselves into. The very definition of success for some artists is the signing of that contract that signs them in to that business model. And they get a huge cash advance, which essentially is a loan that the vast majority of musicians signed to record labels never manage to pay off. Now, if Parker's argument holds true, we shouldn't just shut down the business school. We should shut down the music industry, or at the very least, investigate alternatives to how the music business is structured. Now, with the Industrial Revolution came a lot of positives. The productivity went up, employment went up, the production of certain goods went up, which meant their cost went down, and it had a positive effect. But sometimes when I think of industrialization in terms of industrial fishing, industrial farming, or industrial mining, it doesn't always conjure up a positive image. And when I think of the industrialization of food production, what I think of is cheese in an aerosol can. And when you look at the industrialization of music, what happens time and time again throughout the history of the industrialization of music is convenience wins out over quality. And I'll give you an example. At the very start of the recorded music industry, in the early 1900s, a guy by the name of Emil Berliner invented a disc that spun at 78 revolutions per minute. And that's what music was recorded onto. You could fit one piece of music onto that disc that spun at that speed. 1948, Columbia Records advanced that, and they made a record that spun slower at 33 1/3 revolutions per minute. The implications of that were that you could fit more material on the 33 1/3 revolution record, what was called a long playing record, or what we call now an LP, that it had more music on it because it spun slower. And the implications of that for the consumer were that when you put on an LP, You didn't have to jump up and down as much to turn the record over or to change the record. It lasted longer. So it was convenient. But the other implication was that the slower a record spins, the quality deteriorates accordingly. That a slow spinning record, the fidelity of the sound isn't as good as a 78. So convenience wins out over quality. And if we bring it up to where we are now, when we put music on our phones or on our computer, or when we stream music across a network, it's never huge files that are of high quality that we store and we stream. What we do is we compress the files. So we store small files or we stream smaller files because convenience wins out over quality. When it comes to cheese in an aerosol can, is that made because sprayable cheese is of a better quality or is superior to an artisan cheese? No. It's convenient and it's profitable. Convenience wins out over quality. If music is important to us, and all the indications and all the indicators that we have suggest that it is, should we look more towards quality than we should to convenience? And what I want to give you an example of the Irish music industry working really well, and I don't think that anybody can argue with the fact that Hozier is the biggest success story we've had in terms of music in Ireland in quite a long time. Andrew Hozier Byrne, his entertainment firm, recorded profits in 2018 of 3.6 million euros. And one can only imagine that in 2019, those profits are going to go up. He's having a better year, year on year. His management are doing an excellent job. Now, Hozier's manager is a lady called Caroline Downey. And Caroline Downey, with her husband, Dennis Desmond, they own the biggest entertainment company in Ireland, a promotion company called MCD. MCD are also co-directors of Gaiety Investments, who own and run the biggest venues in Ireland, including the Three Arena and the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre. Desmond and Downey also have a stake in Festival Republic, who run some of the biggest festivals in Ireland and the UK. Electric Picnic is one of their festivals. MCD is also in partnership with Live Nation, the world's largest entertainment company, and Ireland's Competition Authority is currently investigating the sale of MCD to Live Nation. Desmond and Downey are involved with both those companies. Despite objections from competition commissions around the world, Live Nation and Ticketmaster merged, and they formed a corporation that's called Live Nation Entertainment. Bear with me, I'm getting somewhere. Caroline Downey and Dennis Desmond are also co-owners and directors of the record company that Hozier is signed to, Ruby Works. And I tell you all of this to show you how difficult it is to navigate these waters, even when you're very successful and in an Irish context. To sum all of that up, Hozier's manager has interests in the venues where Hozier plays. She has interest in the companies that promote the gigs that he plays. She has interest in the company that sells the tickets for the gigs that he plays. And she owns a large chunk of the record company to which he signed. When Hozier's manager sits down to negotiate a deal on his behalf, whose interest is she representing? Who's she talking to? And who's headlining Electric Picnic this year? Hozier. Now, he's not complaining, and you can imagine that he's not complaining. And fair play to him. You know, why would he complain? He's doing wonderfully. But I'd like to look at that in the larger picture of a record industry where for almost 50 years there have been legal wranglings about the Beatles' back catalogue. Paul McCartney has been in the courts for decades trying to establish rights to the songs that he wrote. And only in 2017 did Sony settle that court case. I watch Hozier's career with so much admiration, but I also watch it with great interest as well. So the music industry has always been notoriously unfair and difficult to navigate, as outlined here by Hunter S. Thompson in his quote. But are there things that we as music consumers and music lovers can do to help the acts and the artists that we love navigate a course that they choose to take themselves? And I believe that there are. And what I would like to do is share those things with you and ask you to do them. The first one is, wherever possible, cut out the middleman. The second one is, go to an artist Bandcamp page. Make their music something that you download directly. Even better, go and watch them play live and support them and cheer and shout. If you listen to music on Spotify, create playlists, add your favorite tracks to those playlists, and share those playlists with your friends and with your family. Buy the t-shirt. Wear the t-shirt at every opportunity possible. Become part of the artist's active community. And if they crowdfund something, support it. One of the wonderful things about cheese, and that's not a sentence I imagined I'd ever say, is that there is so much of it. And the more you support artisan cheesemakers and producers, the more opportunity they have to make wonderful, nutritious, and delicious cheeses. The next time you buy a t-shirt, or you support a band on Bandcamp, or you buy a ticket for a gig, I want you to imagine a cheesemaker at a farmer's market, and imagine that you are buying a quality product directly from source. The next time you absent-mindedly tune into a commercial radio station that populates its playlist from an algorithm, or the next time you let Spotify tell you what track you should listen to next, or the next time you listen to overly compressed music on a platform that doesn't pay artists fairly, I want you to imagine a tin of cheese in an aerosol can. Yes, it's really convenient, but who in their right mind wants to spray cheese directly into their ears? Thank you.